Welcome to segment two of Mac Mania's Mac Men's Monday. A lot of Mac because we're talking about the Mac. It's Mike Duda and JJ Garcia with you. Welcome to segment two for those of you that are joining in on YouTube. For those that are on Substack, well, you don't even have to hit the pause button or another button. Pretty cool perk, I would say. So, JJ, let's talk about the final score starting off with Friday, and that is February 20th.
Yeah, we'll get it kicked off with Niagara taking on the Mount. Niagara would fall to the Mount 63 to 76. It was a junior for Niagara leading the way, Josiah Sabino with 14 points, 8 rebounds, and then the redshirt sophomore, Luke McElden for the Mount, 25 points and 6 rebounds. With Niagara's loss and Iona's win, the Purple Eagles were officially eliminated and the playoff field was set due to this loss by Niagara.
Because Niagara was hanging on by a thread, this one officially knocked out the Purple Eagles and, like JJ said, set the final field for Atlantic City. Let's move over to a thriller. St. Peter's and Iona. The Gales were involved in three overtimes this past weekend. This one was only finalized needing one overtime, and it was a 72 to 64 victory for the Gales, upsetting the St. Peter's Peacocks. Bryce Eaton did drop 17 for the Peacocks, but the graduate forward in Layman Sabali had 14 points and 15 boards to help lead the Gales for an upset victory. And we'll talk about this when we get into the storylines, but Iona is just a storied program that always seemingly can pull off an upset against a perennial contender. They did it against St. Peter's, and like we'll talk about on the Sunday slate, they almost did against Merrimack. But JJ, we got the Battle of the 203 to talk about.
Yeah, the Battle of the 203, the two Fairfield schools, Fairfield taking on Sacred Heart, and Fairfield would win this one by 10, 78 to 68. For Sacred Heart, it was Deshaun Gittins, 16 points and 8 rebounds leading the way. But then for this Fairfield team, we've talked about him enough. It's the freshman, Brandon Benjamin, 18 points, 10 rebounds, a double-double for him. The Pioneers blew a 5-point lead at halftime and was outscored by 15 points in the second half, which just took away their fate. And Fairfield took the battle of the 203s in what was an amazing matchup by both of these Fairfield schools.
We'll talk about this again with the Sunday sleep, but later on in the week, the Pios would blow what they had going into half, that being a lead against the Red Foxes of Marist, and end up falling twice on the road. Team that did not fall on the road were the Canisius Golden Griffs. They took care of the Rider Broncs in Lawrenceville, 72 to 66. Brian Ndonga had 21 points, 6 boards, and 3 blocks, the junior forward for the Golden Griffs. Flash Burton, the sophomore guard, and really the big star of Ryder, had 22 points and 4 swipes, but it was not enough in the losing effort.
Yeah, it was not enough, but something that was enough. The Red Foxes and John Dunn finally made some history. But first, we'll highlight the game. Marist beat Manhattan 84 to 70 on the road. It was sophomore guard Justin Menard with a career high 30 points in the win over Manhattan. And then for Manhattan, it was Terrence Jones who had 29 points and 6 rebounds. So a very high scoring game from both of those players. Marist had 42 points in the first and second half. But the history, a new king was crowned in the MAAC. Head coach of the Red Foxes, John Dunn, claimed his 266th career victory as a MAAC head coach, making him the winningest head coach in conference history.
It was a historic night at Girardi Gymnasium, and Marist, they were looking for it for their leader for a while. They had a three-game skid going into this contest, but behind Menard, Rajon Blackwell, the graduate guard, also added 22 of his own behind a really big night from their guards. They were able to get the victory. Now, despite the loss, the Jaspers did clinch a bid to the postseason due to that Niagara loss. And they did have some history of their own. Junior guard Jaden Winston became the 40th Jasper in men's basketball history to reach the 1,000 career point mark. So good for the Jaspers on that front. But I think what was good was watching the MAC on ESPNU. And that was another overtime game. This time it was Siena and Merrimack. And it went in favor of the Warriors 79 to 72. on the U. Graduate forward Antonio Chandler, after a nice game against the Red Foxes a couple of days prior, had 18 points and 12 boards. It was freshman guard Kaveh Kennedy with 32 points, one-upping Menard. The Warriors claim at least a share as the MAAC regular season champions with this victory. We know from our first segment that this would end up being broken, but on bye that week were the Bobcats of Quinnipiac. JJ, let's talk about Sunday. Not as much history, not as much craziness in terms of the standings, but definitely some fun games.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of fun games. We had another battle of the 203s. This time it was Hamden, Connecticut. Fairfield taking down Quinnipiac 85 to 79. It was Eric Magia with 16 points and 6 assists for Fairfield. And then the senior guard, Asim Jones for Quinnipiac, 16 points, 7 rebounds. This was such a very complete game for Fairfield. Quinnipiac was tied with Fairfield heading into the last 2 minutes or so, and then Fairfield just took off with this one, started hitting their shots down the stretch. And this is a huge win for this Fairfield team. And they're starting to prove that they can be a top team in this MAC conference heading into tournament play.
Let's continue to foreshadow a later segment. Will highlight these Stags. Sim Jones had 7 dimes in that game. Very impressive from the senior guard on Quinnipiac. Let's head down to Lawrenceville once again, where the Purple Eagles fell by 5, 67 to 62 to the Bronx. Will Short did have 18, but Flash Burton again was on his game. 20 points, 7 boards, and 6 dimes.
Yeah, that was a not, I wouldn't say a huge win for Ryder because again, it doesn't matter too much in the standings or playoff scheme of things, but a good like boost up for that Rider team as they've been struggling for a little bit. They finally get a win that they've needed. Flash Burton has been incredible for this Rider team and really is the bright spot to this Rider team. But if you wanted to talk about a crazy game, it was this Merrimack game against Iona. This game went to double overtime with Merrimack just edging out Iona 88 to 86. CJ Anthony had 25 points for Iona, and then it was the freshman once again, Kaveh Kennedy, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. We're gonna highlight him later, but he has been incredible for this Merrimack team and is really the reason that they went undefeated at home, a perfect 10-0 at home this year.
We're going to highlight him in multiple regards, not only possible MAC Rookie of the Week, MAC Player of the Week, but possibly even the MAC Rookie of the Year and maybe even the MAC Player of the Year. Kennedy has been so impressive in the absence of Bud Clark, who transferred to the Big East, that being Seton Hall. Let's talk about that game at the McCann Arena. 65-63, Red Foxes take care of the Pios. Niall Ralph Byer had a really good game, 21 points and 7 rebounds. And I think that's important for the Pios because they were said to quite possibly have the most talented roster in the MAC. A couple of ESPN bracketologists did say that themselves. And they're probably really highlighting Anquan Hill, Deshaun Gittens, but Ralph Byer had a really impressive game, which is important for Sacred Heart, but it would be in a losing effort. Justin Menard, who we highlighted earlier, had 22 points and ended up having the game-winning shot. Down by 1, he drains a 3. The defense prevails, and the Red Foxes come away with another home victory. With that, they overcame a 10-point deficit twice in both halves, once in each half to clinch that first round bye down in AC. And just one more quick note on that previous game. It was a double overtime thriller between the Gales and the Warriors. Again, we'll highlight this more in a future segment, and that being our storyline segment, where we'll also talk about both St. Peter's and Siena, who squared off on Sunday.
Siena, Bear taking down St. Peter's by 9. This was a huge game for Siena. St. Peter's is now on a 2-game skid, but it was the redshirt sophomore Bryce Eaton for St. Peter's who had 17 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds, while the sophomore guard Gavin Dottie had 21 points, 7 rebounds, and he has been insane this year for Siena as just a sophomore, really leading the way for that team and maybe even a player of the year candidate. Again, we'll talk about that later, but this is a really big win for Siena. They're battling for that second seed against St. Peter's right now, but what a game it was for the Siena team, and Gavin Dottie just playing at an insane level in these past few weeks.
Doty is absolutely phenomenal. Definitely a player of the year candidate. Let's wrap up with Canisius and the Mount. 68 to 47. Mountaineers slaughter the Griffs. Khalil Singleton did have 15 for the Griffs, but it was Arlandis Keys for the Mount. 14 points, 7 assists, and 6 steals. That's a ton of steals, folks. On by were the Jaspers of Manhattan. Well, those are the recent scores from this past week. Stay tuned for segment 3, where we talk storylines.